Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I recently tested an RX 580 on the channel. Unfortunately the card I used has slowly begun to fail. It was getting worse and worse in terms of performance for some unknown reason. Now it seems to be jammed at like half of its intended clock speeds, and I've tried everything. I've tried uninstalling the drivers, reinstalling Windows, flashing the card again, using the old heat gun trick. Nothing wants to bring this thing back to life. I took it apart. It's looking pretty rusty. It's had a bit of a hard life, I think, but I wanted to give it one last shot at gaming, even with its issues. And no matter what I do, this will not run at more than 650 megahertz, 655, as you can see in our first game, CS2 here. So it should be clocking at over 1400, which it did do at first, but unfortunately that is not the case anymore. Now it still seems to be able to handle games, but we're getting probably less than half of the performance that we should, and I just wanted to showcase it in this short video today, just to see how well it does before we ultimately have to say goodbye. The card is pretty much done for at this point, but in CS2, our first game, well, we're still getting at least 60 frames per second, so that's something. That said, it only gets worse from here. I'll also have some comparative figures up from a working 580 so you get an idea of what the performance should be like. In Cyberpunk 2077 here, we're still hitting at least 30 frames per second as well. This is with the low settings and the textures and crowd density set to high. I've had to implement FSR 2.1 here to hit at least 30 frames per second, and I recall having to do this to hit at least 60 FPS under normal testing conditions. Usually the 580 is a 60 FPS card in Cyberpunk 2077 here with a bit of upscaling, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Still jammed at around 655 megahertz. I mean, I've got to give it to it, it's pretty power efficient at this point, but so far so good. Well, not really good, but so far acceptable. For GTA 5 Enhanced, we have the very high settings now, or the very high preset. We can't make use of the ray tracing features that this newly updated game brings because, of course, the RX 580 does not support such graphical options, but I think it still looks pretty good at very high. We'd have been better off with the legacy version or the original version of the game here, but plus 30 frames per second with a dying GPU is not bad at all, in my opinion. I remember Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 running at about 60 FPS or thereabouts, I think, with a working 580, and here we're getting about 30 frames per second. As you can see, once again, our card is pretty much maxed out, really struggling here, capped at 655 megahertz, running at way less than 60 degrees, which is nice, and consuming less than 100 watts of power most of the time. I don't know why I thought running through all this foliage would be a good idea. A pretty stressful experience for the 580 here, especially when it's not on full form, but here we go. It still looks pretty good. This game at low 30 FPS plus is still playable, but obviously our card is on its last legs here. I was half expecting it to just pop off by the time we actually finished this video, but luckily for me, or unfortunately for me I should say, as well as you watching, because you've also got to suffer, that was not the case. We will have to suffer through this together. We'll finalise on Starfield. Let's end this card's remaining miserable existence. Plus 20 FPS, almost 30 in some places, with FSR 3 at 50% scaling. Not a bad effort, but certainly not getting what we should be from one of these cards. It's pretty legendary actually, the 580. Still holds up fairly well in a lot of modern titles, providing you don't mind enabling some form of upscaling. But as for this one, yeah, RIP, press F in the chat. Goodbye 580, or what's left of you. With all that said, hopefully you can join me in the next one when we'll actually be testing a working piece of hardware, something a lot more functional. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.